Now please welcome our moderator, Dave Calhoun, and our guests, Gemma Arterton and Tamsin Greig.
Very good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Apple Store here on Regent Street. Welcome to you two as well. I'm pretty guessing that nobody here will have seen the film so far because it opens on Friday. So I just want to recount a little bit about what the film is and what the clips are from before we start talking about it. The film is an adaptation of a comic strip that ran in The Guardian from late 2005 to late 2007 by Posey Simmons. And it was adapted by a screenwriter called Moira Buffini into the film, which we're going to be talking about this evening. To describe it, I'd call it's a kind of rural, anti-pastoral, anti-bucolic rural comedy. It's all set in a village in southern England, shot in Dorset, very picture postcard on the surface, rural England. We meet a family, a married couple called Beth and Nicholas Hardiman. Tamsin plays Beth Hardiman, who run a literary circle in the village. And after we meet some of the ensemble of characters, Gemma's character, Tamara Drewe, turns up, and she's left the village a few years beforehand.
Yeah.
And since then, she's gained a new nose, she's gained a career, and she's gained confidence. And so those who knew her beforehand are fairly surprised. And her presence in the village starts to sort of change some of the relationships between people, cause some upsets. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, that's right.
Begin by asking both of you to talk about your character. So Gemma, you are Tamara Drewe, as described in the film. What was it about the character that you... when you first read the script, how did you feel about her? What did you come away thinking she was, who she was?
At first, I didn't like her at all, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the job, actually, because of her character. I didn't know if I could empathise with her, because she's very manipulative, and in the graphic novel especially, she's cold, and however in the film we managed to make it different, and she's loosely based on Bathsheba from Far From the Madding Crowd, who's, but actually she's very similar to Bathsheba, so charming, manipulative, but ultimately utterly lost and insecure, utterly, and having a bit of a crisis, actually. And so all of her charm and, sexual prowess, she's very sensual, sexual, is actually just a cover-up, and it's like a mask. It's what she knows how to do very well.
Your character, as we'll see actually in the first clip, makes a very powerful entrance into the film. And that one image and that one scene kind of sums up the kind of how she starts upsetting the natural order of this village. And Beth, Tamsin, your character Beth is is one of the things that represents the natural order of this village. I mean, your character is a long-suffering housewife who runs this literary retreat with her husband, who is frankly a bit of a pretty terrible character. Who we know he's a philanderer, he's conceited, he's very sure of himself. He's called Nicholas, played by Roger Allam, and we see your character in that first clip reacting to Tamara's entrance. What was it about your character? I can imagine there's so many times when I was watching the film, because she apologises for her husband so much through her behaviour. She pretends not to see things that are obviously going on in her personal life in terms of his adultery. You must have wanted to shake your character, sort of by the hair and pull her hair out many times during the film.
Yeah, it's not nice hair, so I mean, I would really have loved to have pulled it off. There was something about her that made me as a person, I want to shake her and tell her to, open her eyes and smell the coffee, and if you can smell coffee with your eyes, and and so I was really challenged by the by playing somebody who I didn't agree with, and the more you look at, and it's also hard not to judge somebody as well. You go in with your kind of your judgment, and you go, well, don't behave like that, and so you kind of have to shelve one prejudice after another, and try and discover why people allow their husbands to serially muck about with other women, and I think that there is a complicity in that kind of the complicity of duplicity of people going, no, I'm going to agree to lie in the same way that you're lying, by just not facing the truth.
You mentioned that your hair isn't. You weren't so impressed by your character's hair in the film, so you had to suffer a wig and it wasn't and particular clothes and.
Go on, say it, a fat suit.
A fat suit.
It was a fat suit.
They did create a slightly a wider contour.
You had a fat bum in it.
Well, there is a great line. One of the young girls who you see, the audience sees the world through their eyes. And one of the lines is they're walking away. She goes, "Oh, I feel sorry for her though. I know I feel sorry for her." But she's walking away. She goes, "Got fat ass though." Isn't she? So basically, I just sort of created this character around somebody who's just slightly let herself go because her eye is on everybody else.
Sure. Well, let's see the first clip, and I think everything we've just been talking about there will become a bit more clear. I think you can see in that clip that one of the things that Stephen Frears does with this film is he gives you on one level a very positive, shiny, sunny portrait of the countryside. And as you see there, the sun's out, the beautiful fences and fields, etc. But then the other side, he gives you the underbelly, you know, the sort of the bitchiness of your character, talking about Tamara walking in. I wonder if you, Tamsin, that's something that obviously comes from the comic strip Tamara Drewe by Posey Simmons. Were you aware of the comic strip?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't read it when it was published in The Guardian, but I read it as a graphic novel alongside the script when I was sent the script. It was just really wonderful to have a kind of visual resource to have alongside the script. It's a little bit like reading a script and listening to a piece of music at the same time, that you have a kind of a different sensory perception of the world and the characters.
I heard Stephen Frears said somewhere the other day that he found it quite ironic that obviously there's an ongoing trend at the moment to adapt certain sort of graphic novels, and here he was adapting a comic strip and a graphic novel, but the sort of a completely different sort from the sort of graphic novels that we that we see ended up on screen as action movies and blockbusters. And this is something very British, very local, very intelligent as well. How do you, Gemma? Let's start with you actually. In terms of playing a character that began life as a drawing and as a character on the page, does that in any way affect how you played her or how you saw her?
Yeah, it's a gift actually, because it's a really clear and beautifully illustrated starting point, and you get so much which you wouldn't get in a script of a reaction to something, and in the graphic novel you get these wonderful drawings, particularly with Beth and Tamara actually, of once the characters have gone and the scene has ended, their final reaction, which actually tells so much of the story more than anything. And so it was a gift to have that. And often we would, you get so caught up when you're making the film in the script itself, and often we would refer back to the novel, and then it would inform the performance so much. I think different people had different ways of working with it, though. I know Dominic Cooper didn't really use the graphic novel at all because he felt like the character wasn't as rich in the book, but I used it all the time. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I think with Beth certainly. I mean, when I saw the graphic novel and saw the character that they wanted me to play, I thought it was wonderful that they even thought that I could manage to play somebody like that. And so I spent a lot of time with the costume designer Consolata Boyle, actually finding a way to create those contours, because Posey draws characters in particular shapes, and so you had to find the right shape and the sort of the fabric that they use for each of the clothes are so important to find the edges or the softness of somebody. And then you create a whole from that.
The film's a comedy, and Tamsin, you've got a lot of experience of doing comedy for television through series like Green Wing and Black Books. Do you find it at all different doing comedy on film? And is there a different pace there? Is there a different? Not that your character is a particularly comic character in this in some ways, but is there a different pace? Is it a different experience for you?
Well, I think the thing about film, I mean, I'm sure you know this because you've done so much of it, is that, film is very exacting and it's high definition, it sees right up close. So there has to be a genuineness about the performance. So you can't just play funny lines. You can't go, I'm going to make this bit humorous or find the the comic beat here. You simply have to play the truth of the characters. And that bit there when Beth is looking at her coming towards her and says she's poured herself into those shorts, she means it. And when she says, "I hope they don't give her thrush," she means it. Because she's an eternal worrier. She worries about the consequences of people's actions. And the fact that they've got the most wonderful pause in between those two lines, that's the editors. They're finding the comic beats. All you have to do is speak the truth as the character knows it.
Yeah, that's true. I know. I was watching an interview with Stephen Frears earlier today, and he was saying that he feels that sometimes comedy on film is in some ways underrated as a craft. I mean, people think it's assume it's much more difficult to craft a serious drama than it is to get a comedy right. But he was saying that comedy lives or dies on whether someone laughs or not in the room, and if you don't get that right, you've absolutely failed. I mean, I wonder if I'd just like to know a little bit before we see the next clip, a little bit about how Stephen works as a director. Actually, how both generally as a director, as you both experienced working him on this, and also as a comic director as well. How would you describe him?
I don't know if my character isn't particularly comic, and she's actually probably the most tragic. So, but then I did see him working with the two girls who are. You haven't seen it, but they're really funny. They're probably the most comic characters in the whole piece. And he just has fun. He encourages silliness, doesn't he? And he doesn't. I don't think he has a particular idea of what he wants from the offset, and goes with it. And I felt like he would often just sort of shrug and say, I don't know, do what you want. So, he let us get on with it. And
but he also gets around himself at a really wonderful crew who have been on a lot of films, and he trusts people to do their job. And I think he treats actors in the same way. Is that it's not a creche. He expects you to turn up and know what you're doing, and he just allows this environment where he goes, well, just do it.
Yeah, and also he has an amazing casting director, Leo Davis. I think she really is responsible for the chemistry of the actors, and that's often what it is on set. The casting is so crucial, but more so it's how the actors relate to one another. And I felt like it just was so natural, especially with the girls. Again, they're so perfectly cast, and the way they work together. Kind of, it just happened when they were on set then, and so Stephen would say, well, they're doing it,
And Stephen was very clear from the beginning that he said if he was going to make the film, he didn't want to do it with huge stars. And then he got Gemma Arterton. but got you at just the right time, so that he said he couldn't have made the film if there were massive names, because what you get is then a group of actors just doing the job rather than pulling it in any particular direction.
You were saying just before we came on that you shot this almost exactly a year ago, so last September. Gemma, where were you in terms of? I mean, we've seen you in Clash of the Titans, Prince of Persia, and Disappearance of Alice Creed, all fairly recently, all within all this year on screens. Where did this film fit in terms of making those?
This was the final one of the year. I'd just come off of Clash of the Titans. It was like coming home for me. I was utterly refreshed. It was, real, and it was so. It was how it should be. Filmmaking at its sort of best, I think, because there was no nonsense.
Did you feel you needed that after doing those huge productions? There are very different ways of doing things on green screen.
I just felt I felt lost on those films. Actually, I didn't really know what we were trying to achieve because the script wasn't ready. Whereas with this, there was no way we were going to mess around with the script. It was so brilliant, brilliantly written by Moira Buffini.
But she was also on set a lot of the time, and Stephen does this thing where he kind of smells when something's not quite right. He just stands in the middle of the set and he goes, hold on, and he just sort of senses that something's not quite right, and then he will work with Moira on set to say, look, this bit, and he talks about stories as being as consequential, and he sees in his mind how stories have to be set up, and he knows when it's not quite working. Often he can't express it, so it can be frustrating, and you think I'm not getting what you're asking me to do, but he just waits until he knows what it is. He says this great thing. He said, solutions are waiting to be found. they're the easy part. He said the difficult part is finding out the problems. He said asking the right questions. That's the difficult bit. And he stands and just asks the right questions.
Let's see the second clip. This clip is, it's a scene at the home of Tamsin's character, Beth. So she's in the scene. Her husband, Nicholas, I think is at the head of the table. And everyone else around the table are their guests who have come to their home for a literary retreat, which they're hosting. I think you can see from that clip that it's a writer's film in several ways. Obviously, we see there people are discussing writing, discussing literature, the characters of writers are wannabe writers, but you can also see how rich the script is there as well. I mean, it's a film where the dialogue is very, very sharp. Tamsin, when you read the script, and one of the common reactions to the film, certainly one I had and that other people have had, is that it's actually quite an unusual film in terms of British cinema, and that, you know, it's set in a it's sharp, it's funny, it's well observed, but it's also set in a rural setting. It's unashamedly middle class. People are discussing. You know, in the first clip, someone mentions The Independent. There's a version of the Hay Festival. James Knockerty from Radio 4 even has a cameo in it. It really occupies a particular sort of Englishness. I mean, did that attract you when you read it? Did it surprise you, and did it attract you when you read it?
I mean, there's a part of you that thinks this will never get made because it's not cutting edge enough. You know, it's not Ken Loach, it's not Shane Meadows. You know, who wants to go to the cinema and spend time with Radio 4 listeners? Yeah. The miracle is the UK Film Council did put money up for it. Yeah. Because Stephen Frears thinks that the middle class are a peculiar breed that deserve to be looked at under a microscope and seen with all their flaws and weaknesses and foibles and ridiculousnesses. Yeah. And he's sort of honoured that.
It's curious though that TV does that happily, radio does that happily, theatre does that happily in terms of investigating all levels of British society and everything. But film seems to be much more nervous about doing it, as if. There's the worry that people don't want to go in and see that, and I think this film will prove that not to be the case. That you can investigate, you can cover those sorts of areas and those sorts of people in a funny and in a smart way. Did it surprise you when you read it?
Well, I don't know this world at all because I grew up in the sort of Ken Loach-esque film on the council estate, so I didn't. Yeah. So it surprised me, the script. It was. I wanted to sort of go there and see what it was like. And I didn't know if it was going to translate very well, internationally. Yeah. Because, and apparently it has. And because it's so British. But then if you think about very successful British comedies, they have sort of been about the middle class, haven't they? Like Notting Hill and,
someone did apparently.
4 Weddings.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Someone apparently said to Stephen Frears, which I think he was quite pleased about, they watched Tamara Drewe and said, well, it's like Richard Curtis with balls.
Yes, that's right, yeah. Richard Curtis with balls.
But there's something dirtier and less manageable about this film.
Yeah. I realise that time is running away with us a little, so I'm going to move straight on to the third clip now, please. This clip is a scene between Gemma's character, Tamara, and her boyfriend at the time, who's called Ben, played by Dominic Cooper, who's also the drummer in a band. And they initially meet because one of the reasons you're in the area is to interview him because he's playing at a local festival. It's definitely one of the film's many, many funny scenes, and Dominic Cooper gives a great over-the-top performance as Ben, the drummer in the band. It struck me actually when I watched the film a second time the other day that there's although your characters Tamara and Beth are on the surface quite different. Tamara's open, confident, independent, and you're in some way Beth is somehow stuck, some way stuck in this marriage. Both of you don't really seem to see the truth about the men in your lives. I mean, we know it's obvious to us that your husband's a philanderer, but Ben as well is that clip hints a little. He's not the most likable of characters. Your character is head over heels in love with him, and we question his motives as well. There seems to be that link between the two.
But I think as well, Stephen Frears is really interested in looking at the Englishness of our behaviour. Is that we wear so many masks, and that English behaviour is a front, and he's interested in scratching below the surface of why we pretend that everything's all right, or why we put over a performance of confidence and self-control when actually underneath all is fear and misunderstanding.
Yeah. And that's in some ways you see that through the very look of the film in some ways. Sort of sunny and kind of rural and pastoral on the surface, and all these things are bubbling under. And I think when you do go to see it, Gemma was talking about the characters of the two teenage girls who pop up every now and then. They're in some ways, well, they are separate from the main characters we are watching, but every now and then we see them talking at the bus shelter or walking through the fields, observing what's going on and talking about it in a way that kind of reflects the fact they've been reading a lot of Heat magazine and women's magazines and watching a lot of trashy TV as well. And they're a great comic chorus in the film as well, I think. I'd like to take questions from you. I hope there are some out there. Anyone like to start off? Please don't be shy. If not, I'm going to... Okay. There is a microphone going around as well, so please wait for that.
Hello. Am I on? I'm loud?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm fantastic. I guess my question to Gemma is, obviously, as was mentioned before, we've seen you an awful lot on the big screen over the last year. We've also seen you in the West End. And I guess I wondered, as a performer, which you enjoyed more, because we obviously enjoy watching you in both. But do you find theatre or film a slightly more visceral experience?
I think I prefer the process of theatre. I love it. The rehearsing, it's brilliant. And film is different it's different because you're always, all the way through filming, you're kind of rehearsing as well. You're never putting out the finished product. But it depends, it really does depend on the job, because I loved Tamara Drewe. I loved making it so much. It was like, and I loved Alice Creed as well, because it was like it was like theatre, But it really does depend on the job. They're so different, unbelievably different.
And Tamsin, you, as I said before, you move a lot between radio, theatre, TV, and film. Is that having that? Do you find that variety really sort of keeps your enthusiasm, keeps your energy going?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's just sort of different, techniques that you have to bring to each job that keep your muscles oiled.
Yeah.
And we did Tamara Drewe last year, and then I was fortunate enough to go on to my next job with Gemma, and it was in the theatre. So we were working together in completely different mediums with different approaches, and it was such a brilliant way of continuing a working relationship. Was that the
little dog laughed here in the West End?
Yeah.
Tamsin, I must apologise. I didn't realise before researching this evening, actually, you also play a long-running character in The Archers, which seems to me an unusual connection with this film. It's been described as a sexed-up version or a dirty version of The Archers in some way.
Yeah.
And I didn't realise you actually played a character.
Yeah, I know. I've got a perfect body for radio.
Is there another question out there, please? Anybody? Yeah, there's one there. There's one there, and I'll come down here. If you could just wait for the microphone, please.
I feel a little bit now after hearing this that I might need a bit of a study guide before I see the film. Is there anything you can say to kind of reassure me that I'll be able to get it and enjoy it without knowing all the literary context and everything?
Well, as an independent observer, I can say you don't. Just go and see it, and it's fun, and I think you'll enjoy it, and it'll wash over you. But the experts can defend it as well.
I think the film, I honestly think that it's a great film, and that you get that when you watch it. And we're just talking about it, but you don't need to know all of this stuff. You don't even need to know that it's loosely based on Far From the Madding Crowd. It's so loosely based on that, isn't it? It's kind of annihilated it. But yeah, it's just Stephen's done an amazing job at. You do get all of that, It's a very much an ensemble film. And there are so many really beautifully rich characters, and they're all very strong and well played. And it's none of it's lost, I don't think. Yeah,
and Stephen said, he read the script. He knew the graphic novel and had read it in The Guardian when it was serialised, but he said he couldn't believe it when it came and it landed on his lap, and he just started reading it and thought, this is a wonderful gift. It's funny, it's sharp, it's witty, it's sexy, and it's just a wonderful standalone story that just it just comes at you. You don't need any help.
It's also quite farcical as well. I mean, although there are people sitting around dinner tables discussing literature, there's also scenes with stampedes involving cows and a lot of bonking as well. So it's quite. It's not highbrow.
Yeah, it's quite a good advert. Yeah, go and see it because there's a lot of bonking.
I'm now sold, thank you.
Good. Hope one more ticket sold. There's someone down here, please.
Tamsin, you said that the roles you played before were very likeable to you. You liked Green. I know you from obviously Green Wing and the Black Books, which was excellent, by the way. And you say this role is very different for you in these cases. I mean, do you find that the roles that came before were very similar to your personality type, or are they just things you enjoyed doing that much, and this one was more threatening to you, or is there a type of role you enjoy playing more?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Maybe it's my problem, actually, that I that I make them too likable. You know, I find that if you're going to have to spend time with a character, you know, you're going to have to find ways to like them, because otherwise it's too painful. And, you know, Beth's journey in that is very painful, and she does, you know, there's a lot of tears and a lot of snot and a lot of throwing plants around. And there are two big fight scenes in this between me and Roger Allen. We happened to do them in the same week because of, you know, locations and everything. And I did worry with Stephen about, you know, the fact that it was just too painful. There was one note, and you know, Stephen obviously knew that there was a bigger journey arc, and then I didn't see that. But the play that I did with Gemma, I found very hard to do, not because it was a Gemma, but because the part that I was playing was such an unpleasant woman that I struggled to, you know, not to judge her. Again, it's my prejudice for them. So you have to find a way to like them. Otherwise, it's just... and, you know, you've got legs. You'll walk out if you don't want to spend time with them. So, yeah. Maybe I should just play like an utter bastard and watch you all leave.
Is there another question, please? There's one down there. Again, the microphone's coming to you.
Comparing Stephen to other directors that you've worked with, is there like a special style that he uses, or is there like an odd quirk that he has with it about him, or anything like that?
Any odd quirks?
I think that it's his... He's so self-deprecating, and sometimes we would ask him as actors, as insecure actors, is it all right? And he'd go, I don't know, why are you asking me? I don't know what I'm doing. And we're like, well, you
did
are
actually say
Stephen
a number of times,
Frears.
I'm the last person you should ask. He would actually say on set. So which sort of you think, oh, brilliant, you must trust me.
Yeah.
And then you, on bad days, it was like, oh, shit, you don't know either.
Yeah.
So, you know, but it was just his way of going, just
do it.
Just do it. You don't need my help. Just do it. When actually, you know, everybody does need a bit of help. And there were times when he would just say one thing. And actually it was very interesting seeing how his very loyal crew works around him. When he's not there, when he's off set, when he's got to go and look at other things, whatever, it's like the chickens are getting out of the coop. You know, it all just starts to just run away. And he's this incredible centre of focus that makes it all, and it all goes through him in a non kind of me way. It's really interesting.
And he has such a quiet command on set as well, which is really great. So I've worked with directors who get completely, you know, they can't control what's going on and get really lost. And he just quietly commands it, and it's so nice to know. Everybody needs that in a way, you know.
But he also loves a bit of silliness, you know, so he's very happy for, you know, I had to do a lot of silliness with Roger.
It's not so serious.
So not so serious,
Yeah.
you know, he thinks it's really important for actors to piss about as well, you know, to find a dialogue and a history. And, you know, I needed to find that with Roger because, you know, it's so painful, the fact that he's a liar and she lets him be, and you have to find their history. So he does let you muck about as well.
So you say he's laid back, but in a fun and forceful way as well.
Yeah, like a sort of bloke who comes at Christmas. Who likes to watch you piss about.
don't know if is there another question from the audience? If not, I'm going to take one question from the iTunes fan page on Facebook. I'm going to have to omit quite a few of them because there are questions like, what's your favourite type of cheese?
Oh, I think there's a...
do you like otters? But there's one from Casey McDonough, which is, what was your favourite bit of the movie to act and why? I'll ask you both. So Tamsin first. What was your favourite bit of the movie to act and why? Favourite scene?
There's a scene where... there are only 2 points in the scene where Gemma and I actually work together.
God, are you really going to say it's that?
And there's a bit where we come together and discover, I'm not going to give it away, but we come together and discover something terrible. And it was just wonderful because something just happened in the moment of us coming together, which, you know, is not scripted and it's not, it wasn't particularly directed, and it was just, it sort of made me tingle doing it. It was really special that day.
My favourite scene was...
it's not with me.
It wasn't actually. I'm not going to reciprocate. I hated that scene, by the way. It was awful. No. I have 3 lovers in the film, and one of them who you haven't seen is called Luke Evans. And there's this really beautiful scene where he's in love with my character, but I'm not really into him at this point, but I'm using him. It's just such a horrible... And I come home and he was just I come home and he's sort of drawn up all these plans on how he's going to decorate my house. And he really has stars in his eyes, and I just mess him, you know, I mess him about and tease him, and it was really fun to play. It was good fun.
Why did they ask you to play this part?
Don't know.
It's weird, isn't it?
Don't know.
We're running out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up there. I just want to remind everyone that Tamara Drewe is opening on Friday, so please do go and see it. Tell your friends to go and see it as well. And most of all, I just want to thank Tamsin Greig and Gemma Arterton for being here tonight. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Anti-pastoral, anti-bucolic, rural comedy. It's all set in a village in southern England, shot in Dorset, very picture postcard on the surface, rural England. We meet a family, a married couple called Beth and Nicholas Hardiment. Tamsin plays Beth Hardiment, who run a literary circle in the village. And after we meet some of the ensemble of characters, Gemma's character, Tamara Drewe, turns up, and she's left the village a few years beforehand.
Yeah.
And since then, she's gained a new nose, she's gained a career, and she's gained confidence. And so those who knew her beforehand are fairly surprised. And her presence in the village starts to sort of change some of the relationships between people, cause some upsets. Wouldn't you say?
Yes, that's right.
Begin by asking both of you to talk about your character. So Gemma, you are Tamara Drewe, as described in the film. What was it about the character that you... when you first read the script, how did you feel about her? What did you come away thinking she was, who she was?
At first, I didn't like her at all.
Into the film, and that one image and that one scene kind of sums up the kind of how she starts upsetting the natural order of this village. And Beth, Tamsin, your character Beth is is one of the things that represents the natural order of this village. I mean, your character is a long-suffering housewife who runs this literary retreat with her husband, who is frankly a bit of a pretty terrible character. Who we know he's a philanderer, he's conceited, he's very sure of himself. He's called Nicholas, played by Roger Allam, and we see your character in that first clip reacting to Tamara's entrance. What was it about your character? I can imagine there's so many times when I was watching the film, because she apologises for her husband so much through her behaviour. She pretends not to see things that were obviously going on in her personal life in terms of his adultery. You must have wanted to shake your character, sort of by the hair and pull her hair out many times during the film.
Yeah, it's not nice hair, so...
Now please welcome our moderator, Dave Calhoun, and our guests, Gemma Arterton and Tamsin Greig.
Very good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Apple Store here on Regent Street. Welcome to you two as well. I'm pretty guessing that nobody here will have seen the film so far, because it opens on Friday. So I just want to recount a little bit about what the film is and what the clips are from before we start talking about it. The film is an adaptation of a comic strip that ran in The Guardian from late 2005 to late 2007 by Posey Simmons. And it was adapted by a screenwriter called Moira Buffini into the film, which we're going to be talking about this evening. To describe it, I'd call it's a kind of rural... I
mean, I would really have loved to have pulled it off. There was something about it that made me as a person, I want to shake her and tell her to, open her eyes and smell the coffee, and if you can smell coffee with your eyes. And and so I was really challenged by by playing somebody who I didn't agree with. And the more you look at, and it's also hard not to judge somebody as well. You go in with your kind of your judgment, and you go, well, don't behave like that. And so you kind of have to shelve one prejudice after another, and try and discover why people allow their husbands to serially muck about with other women. And I think that there is a complicity in that kind of. The complicity of duplicity, of people going, no, I'm going to agree to lie in the same way that you're lying, by just not facing the truth.
You mentioned that you're...
And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the job, actually, because of her character. I didn't know if I could empathise with her, because she's very manipulative, and in the graphic novel especially, I don't know, she's cold, and however in the film we managed to make it different, and she's loosely based on Bathsheba from Far From the Madding Crowd, who's, but actually she's very similar to Bathsheba, so charming, manipulative, but ultimately utterly lost and insecure utterly, and having a bit of a crisis actually, and so all of her charm and sexual prowess, she's very sensual, sexual, is actually just a cover up, and it's like a mask. So it's what she knows how to do very well.
Your character, as we'll see actually in the first clip, makes a very powerful